Hello, I'm CJ Powers for another episode of CJ's Corner. Today we're going to talk about something that every business person needs to know when it comes to presenting a slide deck. I was taught years ago by Manuel Munguia that the best way to do a presentation is to only use 7 slides per hour. That's right. How many of us have seen those long, drawn-out, boring meetings with this deck of 62 slides, and they're trying to get through them as fast as they can, and of course they have to skip slides and they miss slides, and there's no time to learn from the customer. It's going to change today. Today I'm going to show you how to build your story so that you can do it in 7 slides. And as you can see over here, not only do we only use 7 slides, the main presentation is only 18 minutes long, very similar to a TED Talk. It's going to be an interactive review at that point where you engage with the people and find out what they really need. You then open it up to Q&A, so if you have a specialist that's with you or anybody else that can field questions and answer questions, that works out really well too. And then you know how to close the deal because you're actually in a position where not only do you know what they want, you also know what they need, and you know how to present it to them in a way where they want to sign on the dotted line. So that's what we're doing today. So let's get started. Hello again. Now we're going to get into it right away, but for those of you who haven't met me, I am CJ Powers. I spend my life creating and building stories, and I spent a lot of time in the corporate Fortune 100 world learning how to do it in a way that was successful. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, the few tips that I learned throughout time, and hopefully they'll help you as well. So let's get a start going here by looking at the first set of circumstances. Now keep in mind, you need your first slide to be impactful. You need people to be able to see it and say, yeah, that's an issue that we're dealing with. In other words, you have to present a problem so that they understand that you can be relatable and that you know what they're going through to some extent. Everybody understands that this is all flexible in the moment. I mean, if you have a person that wants to interact during your presentation and it's a small group of under 10 people, not a problem. But typically you want to give an 18-minute presentation and then keep the interaction going into more specific Q&A. But for the problem, you have to start out by talking about what the common solution is, or what everyone thinks the common solution is. You have to start where the audience is at. You need to help them understand that, okay, this is what the industry has been saying, or this is what most companies have been doing, but it's not working. That's where you have to interrupt your own talk and say, you know what, I always thought this was a solution, but here's why I don't think it makes sense. And that's when you start picking it apart little by little, talking about the pieces that just don't work. It just doesn't function the way people expected it to. Because frankly, out of all the solutions out there, I don't think there's a perfect one yet. So that means that you can find a couple things, at least that are related to your customer, that can show where the holes are in the process. They're going to appreciate that, and they're going to start saying, yeah, I've been wondering about that. At that moment, you talk about how that exploration, that just little bit of addressing the popular solution or the common solution, wasn't sitting well with you. There was something that raised a curiosity inside of you that said, this has to change. Once you express the fact that curiosity is inside of you, you can introduce them to what I call the exploration journey. That's right. You're going to take them on a journey and you're going to talk them through from this common point that you've just established all the way through to the end of the great solution. So here's how the exploration works. You're going to tell them, I dove in. I had to find out the real answer. Here's what I did to explore. Here's the kinds of things that I went through. Now, you have to be careful. You do not want to use jargon. You don't want to use any industrial terms if you can. You want to talk strictly from the standpoint of common language, just like I've been doing here. So far, the techniques I've been talking about, there's actual terms for some of these things, but I'm avoiding those terms because you don't need to know them today. You need to know what the solution is. So when we're talking about a 7-slide deck, we're talking about compressing your information and making it just what helps them to understand and to close the deal. So find a common language to use. The other thing is, you want, when you explore the thing, you want to relive the exploration for them. You know, I was traveling down to Florida one day and I happened to stumble upon a guy that was telling his story, and I noticed there was something unique about his story because more and more people kept on gathering. And it's because, after paying close attention, I realized that he only gave just enough to partially satisfy the people and kept them curious enough to continue to listen. And as a result, the crowd grew and grew. Now, wouldn't you want your customer on the edge of your seat? That's what you're doing through the exploration, going step by step. You're going to talk about your thoughts and your thinking process and how you considered this and that and how these things seem to be the right step. And each time you address something critical to their business or the issues that they're facing. And in that process, you're going to come to the place where they're like, this guy knows what he's talking about. That's, of course, what you want. So now it's time to move on to the part where you're going to start to persuade them to your way of thinking. This is something that has always bothered me. In fact, if it's ever bothered you, write that in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. One of the things that bothered me about it is that I felt like it was making me cheaper. It was like I was trying to go after some things that would, how do I say this? Force the person to decide on something that really wasn't good for them. But you don't have to do it that way. All you have to do is express the truth and the process on that journey that you took, and they'll determine if it's right for them or not. You don't have to force anything. That's the beauty of this. And this is done first by using if-then statements. So you have to first take a look at what have they been thinking, which you've already been learning in the startup process here. But when we're on this third slide, this is the time where you want to say to yourself, okay, I need to get them from point A to point D. So from point A, I have to say something about, if such and such, I noticed that this happens. If-then statements. That's all we're talking about. If-then statements. If this, then this happens, therefore B must also be true. And if this is the case with B, then C also must be true. And by the way, because C is such and such, D is true. Now, by walking them through that if-then, 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 you actually are getting them to agree with each step so they suddenly see the logical progression of thought and they can't help but say, yes, this works. Again, you do it as a reveal as you talk about the journey you progressed through as you were exploring things. So just as a quick reminder, in the beginning, you're going to basically state the problem and say what's wrong with the common solutions. In your second slide, you're going to talk about your exploration and diving in. Then now in this third slide, you're persuading them. And to start off with that persuasion, those if-then statements, the first thing you have to do is you have to do demolition work. That's right. You have to get into their heads and you have to explode out the old way of thinking. You have to destroy it. You have to point out what is implausible about what that common solution seemed to have been. Okay, I'm not going to get into too many details on that one because it depends on your product. But the bottom line is there's always something that isn't quite right that you can find. And if you can demolish that, so they're saying, yeah, that does kind of sound like a stretch. You've got them where you need them. Now it's the time to introduce them to new thinking. So as we're developing this 7-slide deck story, you have to realize that you have to move them one step at a time to keep them interested and to keep them following your logic, which will arrive at the solution. And after you've demolished the implausible, the old way of thinking, you have to establish the new way of thinking. You have to give them a plausible alternative. You have to get them to say to themselves, okay, yeah, I see where this is going. I'm starting to understand it. And I think it might work. And right there, when you realize that they are saying to themselves, okay, the solution I've been using isn't really a solution. This guy seems to have one that is probable. That's the point where you jump into our fourth slide. And that fourth slide is the revelation moment, the aha. This is where you help get them over the fence. Okay, so the thing about getting them over the fence, there is something very, very unique in that you need them to arrive at your solution in the way that you know is best. That's right, you can't tell them the solution. In fact, there's an old saying that we say, show, don't tell. In other words, find a way to visualize it. Find a way to show a chart or a testimonial or something that causes them to say, wait a second, you know what? I think this can work for us in this way. If you've done that, if you've done enough showing and less telling, they will tell you how your solution is going to work for them. That's when you know that the audience has arrived at their conclusion. Better yet, let me explain it this way. They've arrived at your conclusion in a way that they think it's theirs. Because you've worked hard to build through the first handful of slides. Now you're on this fourth slide. You need to make sure that it's a visualized solution for them, that they have that aha moment. And at that point, a lot of people jump in and say, oh, let's close the deal. No, that's not the point. You have to let them glow. You have to let them build hope in themselves. You have to let them well up to the fact that they can justify the payments and all those other things. So you don't close the deal yet. Once you see that they have the aha moment, you delay the conclusion. Why? Because they're excited about their brilliant idea. You have to let them stew with that. You have to let them work it through, and you have to let them get it out and just, if they take over your presentation at that point, telling you how you're going to make them successful, that's okay. Let it work out that way. You need them to know beyond any shadow of a doubt that it was their idea, because that's the way you'll eventually close the deal. So let's move on to the other slide now. We're on to slide number 5. You haven't closed the deal even though they know the solution. Now you're going to talk about the implications of what this solution will be or do. This is the part where you're actually cementing in their aha moment. You're giving them the support. The government a while back, several decades ago, they started a fund and they put in millions and millions of dollars to promote car purchases. Not to promote the sales of cars, but to promote the fact that you should feel good about the purchase you have already made. That's right. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars promoting the fact that you should feel good about the car purchase that you've made. The reason they did that is because that caused people to start desiring their next car. And it would keep the economy cycling. They realized that when they were not promoting it, people always felt like they had gotten ripped off by the car dealer. And they did everything they could to avoid buying another car. So when the government stepped in and started promoting the fact that you should feel good about your car purchase, car sales started going up. Thought that's an interesting thing. But it's the same concept here when we're talking about the implications. This is where, when you're on your 5th slide, you're going to start painting a picture for them. You're going to talk about what life can be like based on this solution. You're going to say, yeah, this aha moment that you've had, this idea that you've come up with, it sounds like a great solution. In fact, here's how it can play out. Here's what it looks like. This is when you start tapping more into their imagination. Because remember, I said a moment ago that you can't close the deal after the 4th slide. You have to wait because they need to build hope. Well, this is the slide you're using to build that hope within them. So you let them build, you let them dream, you build their imagination, you start helping them to see not only the company's solutions, but the overflow of those solutions to their customers and other people. And you just play it big and make them feel really good for having come up with that aha solution. And yes, it was your solution the whole time. But you see where I'm going with this. Once you get to that place, you share a new vision with them as far as what their company will look like going forward. They will see how their solution works, generates wonderful hope and positive cash flow and benefits and profits, whatever it might be. And that new shared vision, you share in a way so that they can grab hold of it because they need to take it to their superiors. Or if they are the decision maker, they need to stew on it just a little bit longer, realizing that, yeah, this is the right choice. Okay, so now we move on to slide number 6. And slide number 6 is going to be just a little bit more of the positive, but now from the standpoint of their benefit. We might be talking about the ROI or anything that is, should I say, a solution that not only benefits their company, but benefits them personally as well. I used to sell very big switches. And one of the stories that I used, by the time I got to this 6th slide, I basically was saying to the CEOs of the companies I was working with, I've gotten buy-in from all these people below you. Here's what they all think. And your solution that you just told me as far as the configuration and what would work for you, pretty much is what they've been telling me too. So you have been right all along. So there's a lot of extra benefits that person is receiving. Now, because you're taking them on this journey, at this point you need to talk about, as you had studied and explored this whole solution thing, what you learned from their people, what you learned from outside professionals, what you learned through your own exploration. You need to start talking about what you learned and what it did for you from a personal standpoint, and how the things that you learned have now overflowed to the people you talk to. That's right. When you're overflowing to others, that information becomes very powerful. In fact, that's the greatest benefit. So if that CEO that you're talking to is saying, oh, wow, this is going to really work because I'm going to get my bonus. Yes, your excitement, your beneficial things that you received as you're expressing it so he can start envisioning his benefits is going to convert into his head from the standpoint of what it means cash-wise. My stock is going to go up. My bonus check will come in, whatever it might be. Now, if it's a humanitarian thing or you're working with nonprofits, that's fine too. Just change what the benefits are. Make the benefits more humanitarian. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you can demonstrate how you were touched through the process and how that overflow from you has touched other people. That gives them hope. It gives them the understanding that, this is going to work for us too. Now, at that point, you're ready for the last slide. Slide number 7. And this one is strictly an informational slide to let people know the main talk's over. How can I help you move forward? Because the benefits you just talked about and your great idea are so phenomenal. I want to make sure that happens for you. What can we do next? And let them tell you, well, put a contract together or send me a proposal or let's sign on the deadline. Let them tell you what that is. In other words, your contact information is there just in case so they have it, but it's just there to signal that we've been in agreement this whole time. You understand the solution. You know the benefits and the hope that you have. What do you want to do next? Let them tell you. They'll let you know. I had a opportunity. I was selling some digital switches to SBC years ago, and it was a huge, huge sale. I was trying to close it at $480 million. And what happened was they were so excited about the product and what I was talking about that they told me what they wanted, which was different than what I had planned. So they told me they were closing the deal at $750 million. That was a $310 million bump because I let them make the decision. I let them come up with the solution. I let them do it all because of these 7 slides. Now, there's one other thing that you need to know. You notice on the, over this way, over here on the bottom it says benefit tagline. Not only do you want your contact information there, but you just want one line of text that helps them to understand who you are to them so that they see you as a person that is worth returning to because you provide whatever that tagline is, whatever that solution is that you might be dealing with. So it's that simple. That's right. That's the entire 9 yards. Going back here to our original screen that said what we were going to be talking about, we went over those 7 slides. My talk was about 18 minutes long. At this point, I would start interacting and reviewing things. If that's not necessary, you just skip that part. The Q&A is the same thing. A lot of times with the Q&A, whoever you're talking with, if there's multiple people in the room, the decision maker is already set, but somebody wants certain details. Now, the reason you allow the Q&A on the details is because it confirms the fact that they mentally are already agreeing with that CEO that, yeah, this is the perfect solution that he came up with, and you're already trying to figure out how to implement it. That demonstrates the fact that his decision was right, it's solid, and their team is already working on it. It's almost like a presumptive close, but you're allowing the customer's team to do the presumptive close instead of you doing it. Then Once all the Q&A is done, you need to have some kind of official close. I always suggest saying, our time is up. Let's go over whatever next steps you need, what next steps I need to do for follow-up, or, do we go right to contract? Once you've done that, you have completed the entire thing. It's a 1-hour meeting or less. It's only 7 slides. Throw out those decks of 60 cards. I hate those presentations. Have you ever noticed that when you have a deck of 64 slides that you have to cram through in an hour, that most of them are so dense with words that you can't even read half of them? And there's charts and tables that you can't even see because the lighting is not right, or the chart is so small to cram in so much information. It is so worthless. And yet, I demonstrated here today with a 7-slide deck exactly what I would do in that 18-minute talk. Now, the reason I went with the 18-minute talk is because TED Talks are 18 minutes, and they use the same structural format. I have a couple variations that I shared for the sake of closing sales, but the fact is, it's the same kind of story. If you use this story structure, you will be successful. And since we're going to be successful, I would say it is time to let you go and create your story. Have a great day.